Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I hope everything's going well for you. I'm Guillaume Carlier, Propel Head of Content and Innovation. I'm really happy today for this new Daily Talks. We've launched a Daily Talk some weeks ago, new format of free webinar, which give the mic to tech and innovation experts into the real estate, the built environment. So today, I'm really happy to receive Claire Flurin, the co-founder of CoLive, and we'll try to have everyone here.
Hello.
Hear me, Claire?
I can hear you, yep.
Great. So Claire, today you'll be joined by Kelsea Crawford from the Cutwork with William Johnson, and we've also Jacob Shea. Is everything here? We'll try to have everyone here.
Yes, hi, I can hear you okay.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, yeah.
So please, the mic is yours, the stage is yours to talk today about the next steps for CoLive. I mean, the CoLive after COVID-19, we'll say.
Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Propel, for having us. So yeah, we are here to talk about co-living, and more specifically the future of co-living, I think as a form of housing or habitat in the rather long run, let's say the next 10 years or so. Guillaume mentioned CoLive. CoLive is the global professional association, and network for the co-living industry. Our mission is to empower the co-living movement and phenomenon worldwide. All of us are members. Kelsea and Williams here are ambassadors of our network. And we wanted to get together to give you a diverse perspective on what we see coming ahead of us. Now, and before we dive into it, a word on the resilience of this co-living model, since it's been trending in the media in the last few days. We at CoLive and at Keys AM, the investor I work for, we very much believe in the dire need for and power of social interactions, plus co-living being or offering good value for both end users and investors. We strongly believe in the resilience of this model post COVID-19, and I think Kelsea, Jake, and Williams here will give us more insights about that. I know that all of you, or at least a lot of you, have a lot of questions about this. Maybe you disagree. If you do, or if you don't, please feel free to ask questions. As Guillaume mentioned, there's a live Q&A at the end of this talk. So I think you're supposed to use the Q&A section rather than the chat. And we'll do our best to answer any question that you have. Maybe a quick intro of our speakers here that I'm very proud and honored to have with me today. Jake Chai is a senior director on Commons real estate team. He leads Commons expansion outside of the US with a core focus on Europe and Canada. Kelsea, she's an American-British entrepreneur, co-founder and CEO of Cutwork, an architecture and design studio that you should know, that focuses on new ways to live and to work. They've designed several projects, among which flatmates with stationary in Paris. And finally, Williams, he's the co-founder and CEO of B-Hive Living. Another concept you should know if you don't, B-Hive Living is a British-born specialist operator, developer, and owner of purpose-built co-living spaces expanding into mainland Europe. So the question on everyone's lips, will co-living, or will COVID-19, have an influence on co-living, and what does the future hold for all of us in this sector? I thought, Jake, maybe you could start by giving your perspective and Commons perspective, being one of the largest leaders in this industry. And then maybe Williams, you can weigh in with B-Hive Living, because both of your models are super interesting and very different sizes, different structures, different offerings and strategies.
Yeah, Claire, thank you. And very excited to be here as part of the Propel by MIPIM movement. So thanks again, and appreciate everybody taking some time to hear a little bit more about co-living. So quick 20, 30 seconds on Common, who we are and what we do. We were founded in 2015 by Brad Hargraves, who was one of the co-founders of General Assembly. We've grown over the last 5 years to be the largest co-living operators in the United States, with over 2,000 beds currently open and a future development pipeline of around 15,000 beds. That pipeline extends to Canada and Europe, and we are a design and full service management company that is asset light. We partner with best-in-class real estate developers and investors who are interested in building co-living or just general rental housing, as our business model has evolved to expand beyond that. And so we don't own any real estate, but we do partner with top institutional real estate developers around the world. So, you know, when we talk about what's been happening with COVID-19, I think the most important thing is to look at the data that we have so far, and then to think about the underlying trends and fundamental state of the market that has allowed co-living to be successful to date, and then think about if those things are going to change. So first off, you know, we can look at the demand that Common's seen on a monthly basis for 2019 compared to 2020, particularly March and April. Common was getting about an average of 15,000 leads a month to live within our co-living properties across the US, on average across 2019. In 2020, January and February, that number had grown to 20,000 plus leads a month. And then in March, once, you know, the US went into more of a lockdown, we did see demand decrease a little bit to about 19,000. And then in April, it's back up to over 20,000. So off the bat, I can say that there was a little minor downtick in top of funnel demand that has since corrected, and we've seen growing demand for the product. So consumers are still interested in it. And with respect to the folks who are living in our properties, we haven't seen there be, you know, much in terms of complaint or issue around the idea of sharing. And I think a lot of that has come down to the proactive approach that we've taken around communication and instilling different services and modifying our service platform to accommodate the current environment, including things like virtual tours, you know, increased cleaning schedules. So again, looking at the data, you can see that demand is still strong for co-living and to live at Common. And fundamentally going forward, I don't expect there to be any alleviation in the affordability crisis that has taken hold of most major cities around the world, that has created an underserved middle of the market. And so as incomes potentially drop and as wages potentially drop with broader economic crisis that may be as a result of COVID, and people move further down the rental ladder from the top rung to the middle, and the middle grows, there will be even more demand for more attainable housing, and co-living is that tool to provide housing at a more affordable price point than the typical Class A luxury multifamily that most folks have been building for the last 10 years in urban cities.
Williams, do you want to add anything to that?
No, absolutely. I think I would emphasize a few things. What we have seen, as Jacob has been, important for us to gather information from the market and from experience. And I think what we have seen as we stand for purpose-built co-living is that co-living in this moment of unprecedented challenge for the housing market has proven not only to be counter-cyclical, but also to be a quite resilient strategy. But also one that has been relatively, hasn't been so challenged to adapt the operational element of the strategy to the current situation. I'll give an example of this. I think I'll talk about some aspects of our purpose-built model that has helped the current situation. For instance, as you know, we stand for this purpose-built model of co-living. So we provide large units alongside communal spaces and activities to foster connection and boost residents' well-being. And that has really kind of really adapt quite well to the current situation. Our large units and communal spaces, you know, provide the whole business grade internet has meant that people can adapt to work at home of minimal contact quite easily. Whether if you are in your own space and you are with your family, that may be a bit challenging if you don't have this whole infrastructure, this business grade infrastructure at home. The other thing is we have bet on technology quite early in our life as a company. And that has enabled us to do three things. One, to manage the business almost remotely. So we have very few of our residents, one, exposing residents to a danger, but also exposing our employees to any sort of infection. So we're able to kind of manage this space almost remotely. The second thing is avoiding necessary touch points. For instance, like things like digital locks enable us to really, or more importantly, our residents do not have to several people being touching, you know, locks and, you know, ended up potentially being infected and contaminated by the virus. And more importantly was the transition to a more digitized experience. We already use a number of several apps, and part of what we have seen is that, you know, a lot of people, you know, felt really isolated by the whole situation, and then the opportunity to live in community, but be able to strike that balance between actually being connected to other people, but not having to do that physically all the time. That has enabled also to be something really important for our residents. And finally, you know, like having a curated community really meant that people came together to support each other and us in extraordinary ways. You know, we have residents working on the front line of the NHS in the UK, and, you know, and people have cooked for them, have supported them. And more important, we haven't seen a single case of infection in our communities. And that's not down to us, has been really down to the work of our residents. People who have volunteered to become health safety ambassadors, who have, you know, support us to keep kind of the whole curation prospective residents kind of up and tight, you know, make the regular, you know, unnecessary maintenance kind of work, because they could be requesting all sorts of things, but they didn't. And they really support us in the spirit. So I can say, all I can say is that, yes, co-living has proven its resilience and its ability to be counter-cyclical.
Awesome. Just to recap what two of you just said, and then I'll ask Kelsea about her thinking. But you mentioned co-living as a more attainable, you say, Jake, I like that word, form of housing, of great quality housing too. You said unchanged management in the end, because or co-living operators already operate in a remote fashion with a lot of tech tools that allow for business as usual, basically, in this time of crisis. You said enhanced tenant experience and maybe reinforced culture through solidarity and interaction between residents. That's pretty amazing to see, and it's all this is happening. Kelsea, I'm wondering, in your design practice, do you see any long-term impact on the way we are going to design shared living spaces in the future?
Sure, thanks, Claire. And again, thanks for having us here today. So my company Cutwork, which is an architecture and design studio, was founded around the idea that together has changed, which is something we've been saying for years. And it's funny, you know, this crisis happens and suddenly it's in the forefront of everyone's mind. The way that we are together is changing. And I think that's what our design practice strives to do, is to be constantly in conversation with that. And to be on the forefront of how design is evolving for shared architecture and shared space, which makes co-living an incredibly fascinating topic to be working on and to be thinking about. And from the very beginning, all the work that we're doing is looking at flexibility, modularity, and versatility as sort of the pillars of shared design for shared architecture. And I can say that I only see that becoming more important and more necessary in design of shared space moving forward in a world post-COVID. because yeah, in the space of a few short months, together has radically changed. And I don't think we could have predicted how much that would be. And I mean, everyone's felt it. I think we've all changed our houses around. We've turned attics into workspaces. We've turned kitchen tables into dining tables, into offices. And I think this is kind of a challenge that we tackle all the time for co-living. You know, how can a very compact space have multiple uses and be very flexible and versatile? And I think that confinement has just exposed the limits of private space and how we need to design smarter and more effective living space. And that today the spotlight is really on the importance of the physical interior space, how it can evolve from something traditional to something more agile, something more versatile, and help us feel connected and part of a larger community, even in confinement. And then also, how are the physical spaces of tomorrow going to be designed in a way that speaks to what might be a new normal, where we need to spend a lot more time inside. So yeah, suddenly the conversation we've been having with what has been a very small group of people for a few years is coming much more into the mainstream, and I think having a lot more resonance in traditional multifamily residential, in hotels, in micro apartment. And I think that what hopefully we see is these trends start taking hold in other more traditional industries and slowly but surely evolving.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. On that note, I often get the question of social distancing and the possible impossibility of co-living, given that we may have to distance ourselves regularly in the future. But then when I listen to you all here in our prep talk, in our meetups at Co-Live, I feel like the focus is more on helping each other in co-living space than on staying away from each other. Could you all of you pitch in, and maybe Kelsea, tell us if you are prepping to design for social distancing, or if you're prepping to the contrary, to design for maybe reinforced or enlarged households?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, Claire, I've taken on the role of helping lead the co-live community in France. So it's a conversation we've been having a lot in the last few weeks. And I can say that everything I'm hearing on the ground from our clients, from the community, and from my experience in designing these spaces, the fear is much more coming from media and places who don't quite understand the model of co-living, like that social distancing might kill co-living as a model. People who are actually in the trenches every day with co-living, whether it be investors, co-livers, operators, are kind of singing the praises of this model as a very resilient, very sustainable way of housing. I think the people who suffer the most in this sort of situation are people who are extremely isolated and alone in a very small apartment, who have really felt the weight of being in confinement, whereas people living in co-living spaces and operators finding ways to be more creative with leasing, with payments, have really felt a sense of community. And really are just ecstatic that this might be a way that we really move forward. But I don't also see the trend of making smaller bedrooms just because of confinement. I think that it's about being smarter, about designing ways for people to self-quarantine and repurposing social shared space in moments of crisis like this. But maybe Jake, maybe I could piggyback this to you in the term of looking at smaller design or smaller room design.
Yeah, I would add to that, Kelsea, and just share that Common operates what we call shared suites, which in Europe are called clusters, where you have multiple bedrooms sharing a normal sized kitchen and living room. And we also operate micro units, which for us are between typically 250 and 350 square feet, or 25 to 35 square meters. And so one way that I think space standards will evolve, and I'll just answer the question directly, Claire, from you, which is that we have not seen design shift towards specifically designing for social distancing. I think we're all holding the belief that, and I hold the belief that the COVID crisis will be short to medium term, but this is not what we are experiencing in this moment of lockdown and no offices and et cetera, not having a dinner with your friends or family. I don't believe that that will be the normal in the medium to long term. So we're not seeing projects or developers start to shift design towards that. What I think we are seeing is a big lens put on the smallest of micro units and some of the space standards, particularly in the UK, around co-living units that are between 14 and 17 or square meters or anything less than 20. And I do imagine that there will be an evolution away from that and to small suites that may be larger in size than what's currently on the market. And I think that that's probably a shift that is creates a better product in general and is independent of COVID specifically.
I guess there's a size difference between the US standards and Europe standards.
Absolutely.
But so we have two questions that are somewhat related to what we just discussed. The first one is, what do we think about densification? Is it going to keep increasing, or to the contrary, are we looking at a slowdown of urbanization, and how does that affect co-living, especially in the eyes of investors? Second question, which I think is related, is how do investors see appetites for co-living? So maybe we can all pitch in, and I'll definitely pitch in on that. And I think we had a great conversation on contractual relationships in our prep chat, and I think that's important to talk about lease versus management contract. So what about we start with the densification question? Any of you want to go in? I know, Kelsea, you have lots on your mind on that topic.
Sure, why not? I'll try to be short and sweet. This is one of my favorite topics right now, so I'll try not to go too deep. But I mean, as many of us know, the projected trajectory of the city is to be the dominant model for ways of life, quality of life, place to live, place to work. But I think we're having some alternative thinking, and especially with COVID, is this trend still holding true today? 4 billion people live in urban areas today. Projected estimates are that by 2050 will be 7 billion people in cities. But during confinement, nearly 1 out of 4 people in Paris left the city for a more rural area. I think that leaving the city in times of crisis reflects weaknesses that they concentrate. And I think these weaknesses are systemic. They go beyond a time of crisis. They're also that the city has become an epicenter of economic inequality, of loneliness, of difficulty in finding connection, despite being surrounded by massive people. And not only do they cost more, but the space we're able to inhabit is getting smaller and smaller. The average home size in Europe over the last 50 years for a 3-bedroom home was 75 square meters, 750 square feet, Jake, for the American crowd out there. In France, over the last 50 years, today this has shrunk to 60 square meters. So we're looking at what the city provides is an external living room in the form of shops and public space, an external kitchen in the form of restaurants, an external garden in the form of public parks. But when we're looking at moments of crisis like this, we see this shut down. And then, what is living in a city in a very expensive, very small space? So I think looking at the city as a living room and understanding this, if we do come into a society where pandemics are more common, which is one prediction, it's not necessarily mine, but it also raises a lot of questions of why we live in such dense areas. When digital tools are completely revolutionizing the way that we can work, we're all across the world today and we're having this great talk, and it just took sitting in front of our computers. So given the choice to live a bit further away from a city, to have a higher quality of life that's less expensive, but equally as connected, I think we could see shifts in the way people look at having a blend of rural and urban life and existence, and co-living is just such an exciting avenue to see where that might happen.
Maybe I'll pitch in here because we only have 2 more minutes, and I want to.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, that was fast. I want to let Williams and Jake give their perspective, but at KeySAM, we've thought a lot about this densification question, and even though yes, there's probably an increased interest for smaller cities, smaller urbanized areas. I think we need to be careful and not promote urbanization of land that is not urbanized yet. There's an important environmental impact here. And second point is that cities will probably remain economic magnets, right? Opportunities will probably still be concentrated in cities. And so I think co-living as an urban way of living still has a future. Maybe the future is a little more diverse than what we see today. That would be my point. And to transition to Jake and Williams and the relationship between property owners, investors, and operators. So far in Europe, at least, co-living has been growing as a lease model because it was reassuring investors to have a master lease on a property. I mean, it diminishes the risk. I was going to say it's very minimal risk, but not in the eyes of everyone. There's an argument nowadays for shifting to a management contract model because all operators may not be able to take the risk of future crisis. And investors may be the one, and I'm going to say responsible investors may be the ones to take that risk on occupancy. At least that's how we look at it at KeySAM. We think in order to build resiliency in the operators themselves, we need to be thinking in terms of management contract more and more. I know, Jake, you have opinions on that, and maybe as a conclusion, Williams, you could tell us your perspective on the European market.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it really brief, but Claire, I think you're touching on something that's really important, which is to separate the future of co-living and the fundamental environment that has made co-living grow from operating models that are not sustainable. And I believe that the master lease model, this has been coming for quite some time, and we've seen it in other industries that are related to residential housing or other real estate industries where master lease models have proved not to be sustainable. And I think the groups that are perhaps in the most uncertainty at the moment are groups that signed master leases as a predominant business model on the co-living, and then I think that also extends to other kind of alternative housing classes like the STR operators, and then as a second degree from that, folks who have focused on short-term stays primarily, nightly or monthly stays, and the groups that combine both of those strategies are probably in the most, I've seen them as in the most distress. Commons model has been management agreement since day one. That's been the predominant focus for the business. Our master lease portfolio is minimal compared to what we've done on the management agreement side. And that was a fundamental way that we set up our business. And we also only focus on long-term tenants, and the average tenancy is over 10 months for folks that stay with us, and most people sign 12-month leases. So, we're growing the business, we're hiring on the ops side, we're opening new properties on a weekly and monthly basis, and continuing to sign deals with top institutional developers as we see continued appetite from the real estate investment community. What we're seeing is, and this was existing before COVID, but a move away from Class A luxury multifamily as that side of the market has gotten more saturated, and we were hitting occupancy slowdowns and slight rent decreases, or at least rent stagnation, and investor appetite moving away from that segment of the housing market and looking for other opportunities, and co-living has proven to be that opportunity. So excited to share more when we can about some really great partnerships that we've established with some global investors. And so continuing to grow through management agreements.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, so Claire, if you want, I will share my perspective on that. I think, like I echo what Jake said, it's an important discussion, and as Kelsea, I have been involved in several discussions through Co-Live from operators, investors, and also not only private investors but institutional investors about how we move this industry going forward. And what we have seen is indeed that we have seen that the operators that had that lease model, they are really suffering much more from this uncertain economic climate. And those that have followed management contract have seen to have built a more resilient business. We are a non-operator, and now we are turning much more into a similar business growth model than like common, where we're making agreements with developers and institutional investors to create and expand our spaces. And all the discussions have been so far based on management models. Whenever we see lease model discussions, we absolutely, for all the numbers I have seen, I don't really feel comfortable with the element of risk that brings to the operator. But also I think one of the unique things about co-living is that there is this very close relationship, not only between the landlord and the tenant, but also in the sense like we as operators and our residents, but also between whoever works with us as an investor as well. We have seen that, it's a model that has been able to attract a lot of value aligned investors, people that really believe in the industry. And these people can certainly, from my experience, are open to the management contract and see that's being a key model for the future. But the future is to tell what's going to happen, but certainly is our preferred model and the one we see to be more resilient and to provide a more fair split of risk and reward between the operator and the investor.
Awesome. I think that's a great conclusion. I won't add anything else then. I realize that we have questions on the actual value proposition of co-living versus traditional residential. So feel free to reach out to us either personally or through Co-Live, co-live.org. You can become a member and join the community and reach out to everybody out there. Thank you very much to the three of you, Jake, Williams, and Kelsea. Thank you, Guillaume, and the team.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much for all of you. And I hope everything is all right on your side of the world. Yeah, same. I hope you're all doing well.
Okay, thank you ever so much, everyone, and it has been a delight. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to write to us. You can always find us through our website. Thank you. Thank you, William. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.